Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm speaking to you from inside a dream. Can you hear me?
Is it your dream or my dream?
The weather is fine.
Okay. Yeah, not here, but maybe in your dream it's fine.
I feel like if did David Lynch ever do a podcast? If he did,
Oh, he must have.
surely it would be like that, wouldn't he? Didn't he used to do these weird weather forecasts, didn't he, on YouTube?
Yes, I thought I saw that in his on his weather report TV series, 152 episodes. He's got some stuff I've definitely never seen. So
Okay, I think they're all kind of utterly mad. I've got a question for you, which is, do you remember where you were when Stanley Kubrick died?
I don't. I don't think I do. I remember. Was it Eyes Wide Shut was his last film? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So I remember having a very scary moment right after that. Did he die before that was released? I forget.
Yeah, but like only a few weeks before it was released,
Okay.
I think.
So I had I remember this one very strange moment. I had already seen the film, so it was in my head. And then I was dog sitting, and I had to take this dog out for a walk very early in the morning, darkness, like 5 or 6 in the morning. And I swore that I saw one of those characters wearing one of those creepy masks out on this deserted little trail. And it scared the hell out of me. I thought, oh, this is gonna be Kubrick right there. So it's almost as if I saw a ghost of his or a ghost of one of his characters. So that's what I remember, because it was right after I'd seen the film. So it was probably right around when he died. But I couldn't tell you the exact moment. But where were you? Do you clearly do?
I mean, it's a tremendously banal story, like pretty much everything I say. But I remember hearing it on the radio. It was like a JFK moment, kind of for me. I was anaesthetizing for a hip replacement at Tunbridge Wells Hospital. And this came over the radio, and I remember being kind of gobsmacked. Oh, like Stanley Kubrick has died, and I sort of announced it to everybody in the operating theatre, and everybody looked at me as if I was just mad. Who's that? What are you talking about? Get back to work. Nobody else was in any way at all interested, and I was kind of gobsmacked by this JFK moment. Yes. So David Lynch passed away about 4 weeks ago now, I think.
Yeah, it was in the middle of that the infernos in Los Angeles too.
Is that right?
Yeah, it seemed like oddly a great time for him to go. It just seemed like, okay, this is the way he would want to go, probably, like something super dramatic and super weird and surreal.
Yeah,
I believe he was quite ill for a good while, but
yeah. So I think he was on home oxygen for quite a while, wasn't he? So I'm guessing he had kind of sort of COPD, emphysema, chronic lung problems. And you would rarely see him without a cigarette in his mouth, so not a tremendous surprise. But there's only a limited number of film directors who've got their own adjective, and he was definitely one.
Yeah, Lynchian.
Lynchian, yeah, exactly. But I don't know, what does it mean to be Lynchian exactly?
Oddball, maybe.
Yeah, I suppose so. Kind of oddball and yet kind of strangely disquieting and
iconoclast.
But it's kind of something sort of like it's the horror of the everyday, isn't it?
Mm.
And it's the weirdness of the familiar.
Yeah.
And the whole kind of dreamlike sort of nature of a lot of his films and a lot of his adverts as well. I think he did a lot of advertising, and they all kind of share this kind of strange, detached, dreamlike tone. There's not many other people who get to have their own adjective.
No.
So it was definitely somebody who made a very unique mark. I remember I once pitched a film as Lynchian.
Oh.
So I pitched this film to Jake West, who's a British horror director, and I was saying, got a great idea for a film. I had this kind of this notion of like a sort of a folk horror film about these maligned little fairies. And you would probably never quite see the fairies. And I was saying, you do it all in camera, and it would be kind of all a bit kind of mysterious and strange and off kilter and weird. It would be Lynchian.
Ooh.
And he told me that you should never use the word Lynchian whenever you pitch to anybody, because it's the word that makes producers' eyes glaze over.
Probably, yeah.
Loads of people like this notion of making something Lynchian, but none of these Lynchian films ever make any money.
That's right.
So people absolutely hate to be involved in financing them. That's probably one of the most useful lessons I learned. It's probably one of the reasons why my pitching is so bad.
Yeah, you've cursed your own work right there. I think for me, I have mixed feelings about his films. Some of them are really, really important to me and fundamental in my growth as a writer and someone who wanted to make films. And I think the thing I treasure most about his work is it's just different. And he's emerging in the 80s. And I think of the 80s, we've talked about Margaret Thatcher recently and Ronald Reagan. I just think everything was going so corporate and safe and conservative. And then you've got David Lynch producing these absolutely wacky films that just run against the grain of what was becoming the conservative and safe zeitgeist of at least American culture, probably English culture as well. I don't know what your movies were like in the 80s, but that's kind of when he emerged for me. I guess he dates some films back to the 70s, I suppose, but just some really wildly different films. And I think I just love that about him, just this, I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to be different. I'm going to do something that no one else is doing. And I think that's his biggest gift, I think, to Hollywood. And the fact is that he was a really Hollywood guy and an LA guy, but he did stuff that was very contrary to what was conventional. And I guess that's, I think that's the value, the deepest value I find in his work.
It's amazing, really, that he was allowed to continue to make movies. I suppose you had kind of a bit of a hiccup, I suppose. I don't know whether it was after Lost Highway or it became quite difficult to get things made. I think wasn't Mulholland Drive originally made as a television pilot, and it was easier to get things put on TV than it was on the screen, on the big screen. So it wasn't entirely smooth for him. Yeah. But he's left a pretty remarkable body of work.
And just think, on television too. That's the other thing, is that he was able to get Twin Peaks on on broadcast television in the United States with nothing short of a miracle, really.
I suppose I wonder whether if you try to explain to somebody now, Twin Peaks was such a remarkable achievement, it doesn't seem like so much of an achievement now, because we live in, no pun intended, peak TV era, where people are spending a lot of money on TV and people are exploring ideas, and there's a lot of intelligent work on television. Whereas in the mid 80s, it absolutely wasn't. Yeah. In fact, it seems amazing that the same medium that was having big hits with Moonlighting and Cheers was also making Twin Peaks, which just seems to belong in a completely different universe. Yes. Difficult to remember what a remarkable achievement that was, at the time. Did you like Twin Peaks, though?
I did. I've liked it going back to see it later. Like when it first came out, I guess I would have been, high school or just a little bit after high school. So I just wasn't watching a lot of television. And then I went back and started watching it about 10 years ago with some friends. And it really dawned on me as being much higher quality than I remember it. And just remembering the time that it came out, I was very impressed with the fact that this was on television. Now you can get that stuff made and it'll stream pretty easily, I think. It might not have as a big an audience, but the fact that it had a big audience and it was on broadcast television when you really only had 3 or 4 networks was just impressive. So I have to go back and look at it with that in mind. Like what was the environment when he actually did Twin Peaks?
Broadcast television is something so very different to streaming, isn't it? Yeah. It's difficult to remember how different that was. He'll always be important to the Two Real Cinema Club, because his version of Dune was the first film that we talked about. Yeah. In fact, that was our prototype episode, wasn't it, where we compared new Dune with old Dune. Yes. And I still vastly prefer old Dune.
Definitely, yeah. And I don't read that literature. I don't know those books. I didn't love the movie, but I loved how weird it was, and I loved again, that it got made, and Sting is in there, and there's just these weird characters and weird things happening. So which I think the new Dune films don't really have. I think there's something very funny in the Lynchian Dunes that are lost, I think, in the new Dune films.
I mean, his version of Dune was weird, but it's an appropriate weirdness, I think, for the material. It's the right kind of weirdness.
Exactly.
And there's still some pretty remarkable and astonishing visuals, which I think are vastly more create vastly more of an impression than the kind of the slightly bland, corporatized new version of Dune.
Yeah.
But then Mulholland Drive was a fairly big film school film, I think, while we were there. I think it had come out like a year or two before we went to film school, and I remember going to see a screening of it at the film school.
Yeah.
And that's one of those films that feels, really fundamental to the experience of going to film school.
Yeah.
A film by this remarkable film stylist about the film business.
Yeah.
And reminding everybody what a pit of vipers it is. I haven't seen it for a long time. I don't know whether it still has that same effect.
This is a film that I don't like.
Now, tell me more.
It didn't make any sense to me, and I wasn't really clear on what was happening and what I was supposed to be paying attention to and what I could ignore. And I will say that I think I would categorize him a little bit with Fellini in the sense that visually I basically always love what he does, but he's made some of the worst films I've ever seen and some of the best films I've ever seen. So he's right in that wheelhouse. And Mulholland Drive is this thing that I don't understand why other people like it, and I don't want to go back and watch it again because it was painful to do it the first time. And I'm sure that if I had watched the director's cut or something with commentary on it, maybe I'd understand better. But I was never engaged in it, and I thought it was ridiculous. So I don't love all of his films. There are a couple of his films that I think are just gold, though, and that's why I appreciate him as a character and as sort of an inventor in film.
I'm gonna ask you what the good ones are in a minute, but I'll say Mulholland Drive. I think it's one of those films where it's structured like a puzzle box, isn't it? It comes across and it's teasing you as if to say, there is a meaning underneath here. There is a puzzle. Can you figure out the puzzle? I will give you some little clues, and maybe if you think very hard, you will be able to figure out, what it is that I'm driving at. And you get to the end of the movie and you kind of think, well, I haven't quite figured out the puzzle. What is the puzzle? And at the end he laughs at you and says, there's no puzzle really. It's all a joke.
Yeah.
Anyway, here's a rabbit costume. Bye. And I just feel a little bit like that. But, but then maybe that's sort of what the solution of the puzzle is. The solution of the puzzle is that there kind of isn't a puzzle.
Yeah.
And the puzzle is that you thought there was a puzzle. I think it's an entertaining confection, and there are some dynamite, terrific scenes in it, and I think it does have something to say about the film business. But it's a curious egg, maybe a curious egg. What are the good ones?
The good ones are, certainly Blue Velvet. That's the first film I saw, and just at like a very transitional time in my life. I was going off to university, I think, and loved it. Loved Kyle MacLachlan in it. After having seen Dune, and after seeing the new Dune to compare it to, I do enjoy that film, and I like the fact that he got it into one. What is it, an hour and a half for a film? It might be 2 hours or closer to 2 hours, but he did it in one film, whereas Denis Villeneuve has to take two films.
Two and counting, I think, isn't it?
No, please.
I think there may be three, mayn't there?
Oh, God. Well, part one, part two, I guess so. You could have a part three. Oof. I appreciate that. So he's got this real cluster of films. Elephant Man before that, I think, is just a gorgeous film and a really well done film. It still sort of confuses me a little bit in the making of it, but it's still just I think that's probably his best film. I really love that one. Wild at Heart. I think all the Twin Peaks stuff, and then I think Lost Highway. That's for me. That's the heart of his work right in there. It's basically the 80s and maybe a touch of the 90s, something like that. But I think and again, compared to all the other crap that was coming out in the 80s, I just think it really stood out as being original and imaginative. And I think that's why he holds a place for me, because he made that decade, which I thought was pretty crappy in general, he made it a lot better.
I think Lost Highway may be his best picture.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
It's again a pretty remarkable piece of work. That is one of the films that does seem like a little bit of a puzzle box again, but I think it's a puzzle with a solution.
Yeah.
Or at least you can kid yourself that there is a single definitive interpretation of what happens.
Sure. And that's actually quite a bit later. I just noticed that's 1997. I can't believe that Lost Highway is 1997. Huh. There you go. So he's got that's a pretty good run there.
Yeah. That is a run that most people will be proud of, I think. God, amazing to think that's nearly 30 years ago that Lost Highway came out.
Yeah. And,
that's a long time.
And his credits go back to late 60s, 1970, did short films. Eraserhead 77, so right there he's at,
right.
Closing in on 50 years of filmmaking.
Oof. Wow.
Okay. More,
that's a lot of. That's a long career with a very slow takeoff to start with.
Absolutely.
You can watch on YouTube. You can watch the adverts of David Lynch. There's like a half-hour show reel of his ads. There's a couple of interesting things to note. First of all, he would always put the same people in them. So he would kind of, he was, had a little loyal band of actors who would appear in a lot of his material. Yeah. And so you kind of get these Lynch regulars turning up in adverts for, Gucci or whatever. One of my favorite things that he ever made is a PlayStation advert. I think when the PlayStation 2 came out, Sony paid David Lynch loads of money to make some adverts, and they are kind of like a 60-second distillation of the most Lynchian of Lynchian ideas. Nice. There's one that I've watched kind of many, many times, and it kind of hypnotizes me. It's like a black and white shot of this guy. He's walking down a corridor, and then his head pops off, and then his arm, like his hand falls off, and a load of smoke comes out of the sleeve of his jacket, and then the smoke clears, and he's standing in this kind of clearing, and there's 3 people sitting in seats watching him. One of them is the guy himself, like a clone of himself sitting there watching him. One of the people is like a mummified figure, completely wrapped in bandages with these blood stains around the head and the leg, something like that. So it's like a mummified corpse. And then the third figure is a human with the head of a duck. Oh. And the duck tells the man, "Welcome to the third place." And then that's the end of the advert. And I have no idea who watched that advert and thought, yeah, well, I'll be buying a Sony PlayStation. It has nothing to do with PlayStation or video games or anything at all. Utterly nuts. But you know what? It drilled a hole into my brain. Yeah. And I still remember like every moment of that advert. Yep. It's, a remarkable series of images, utterly irrelevant, completely mad, fantastic.
But I guess just like singularly Lynchian, right? I think that's the thing.
Yes.
That's the thing that is really hard to do, is to really stand out, and he did it. And I think that's what's impressive to me. I think, and one of my favorite films of his is actually very un-Lynchian in some ways, which is The Straight Story.
Ah, yes.
I love that film. And hey, that's a road picture. I think we did a popcorn counter about road pictures.
Yes.
That's definitely a travel picture, a journey picture. And that, it seems, it's weird. Like the weirdness is baked into it. And I think it's based on a true story. So the weirdness is in there. It's very Lynchian, but at the same time, it's funny that it's called The Straight Story, because compared to his other films, it's a pretty straight film. And I think that in some ways, I think I saw that on a bus too. I did. Remember we talked about Speed on a bus?
Yeah.
I saw The Straight Story on a bus, and it seemed fantastic.
You've seen a lot of good films on buses.
Yeah, I guess I have. I ain't done bad. Huh. I got to take more buses. So it's kind of like the most un-Lynchian film. But in that, it's Lynchian. That doesn't make any sense, and that's the way David Lynch would say it too.
It's like that's the joke, isn't it? It's like this. He was made a Lynchian film, which is an anti-Lynch film.
Yeah,
and that's what makes it Lynchian.
Exactly.
One thing that does make me kind of sad is that now that he's died, who is going to replace him?
Yeah,
there is nothing There is nothing like that.
Yeah.
I'm struggling to think if there is anybody making work today who has that level of unique, identifiable style and vision, and like his sense of humor, and his utter uncompromising sense of self. Is there anybody else making films that can offer that? There's no one who's going to replace him, I think, is there?
Not that I can think of offhand. I mean, someone will try, and maybe someone will say, "Oh, my work is Lynchian," and then it will never be made. Maybe that's the problem. You can't say it's Lynchian, otherwise you're not going to get it made. So maybe you're right.
You're right. That's why we're never going to see another David Lynch, because people keep trying to pitch these Lynchian ideas. As we learned a couple of weeks ago with Voyage to Italy, we are surrounded by the dead, and now sadly they are joined by David Lynch. Well, getting back to the living, well, I guess we should go and see Emilia Perez.
Oh yes, that's going to be un-Lynchian. But let's let David Lynch rest in provocation. Is that how you would say it? Rest in provocation.
If people don't say that, they should. I will from now on.
But you can only use it for someone like David Lynch, so you can't use that. Don't overuse it.